Hey everyone, this is Fabriello and welcome back to a new video. Hope all of you are fine and safe during these crazy times we live in. It's been a while since I made a video, but I was very motivated by doing this since this is going to be a double feature project actually. First, today I'm going to do this video response to Erick Landon RPG, since some days ago he posted a video about RPGs that need remakes on his channel, and I'm going to link the video to the description. Yeah, to the oh no, I'm completely stumbled here. You can tell I haven't done one in a while. Gonna put the link down below so you can check the original video. And let me say, like, while Erick's video is absolutely fine, I thought about doing this response because to me, keywording at the beginning of his video, what he said, is quite misleading. So today I'm going through his picks and do some commentary, and next time I will suggest some picks of my own that in my opinion could benefit from being remade, so stick around for that. Let me say, like, wishing for JRPG remakes is nothing new among the gaming community. We all thought and discussed about them. We all want our favorite games to be re-released in some shape or forms, ideally enhanced shape or forms, to newer consoles. However, I think that in these past weeks, it seems to me that there is a lot of hype regarding this topic following the Final Fantasy VII remake. And this is, of course, totally fine and understandable. But what's making me scratching my head, to be honest, is that now all of a sudden every game needs, and this is an important word from this video, to be remade like that. I mean, to be honest, I don't even think that Final Fantasy VII needed such a remake. There's that word again. Obviously, I'm not saying anything negative about the remake, since to begin with I haven't even picked it up. While Final Fantasy VII overall was an underwhelming experience to me, the game was fine, and the only thing that really needed to change was the graphics. Let's be honest, those character models, though nostalgic, are just garbage. The remake looks absolutely amazing. I heard some of the music, it's very cool. The combat system is the only thing about the remake of which I'm not entirely convinced. Just for personal preference, though, I'm sure this game is the best action RPG ever made, but I will always prefer turn-based games no matter what. And to be honest, I'm not even that surprised about the change in the gameplay. Like, there is a lot of people who's complaining about it, but since they announced us, like, my first reaction was, oh, that's a bit weird, but it makes sense, because I think, like, first of all, there were previous indications, at least to me, from games such as Crisis Core or from the Advent Children movie, that Final Fantasy VII could work as a more action-based game. And also, in particular, the second reason is that, to me, it feels like a sort of natural progression for the Final Fantasy series, especially following the combat system evolution of the games, particularly after 13 and 15, especially. Because if you look footage of 15 or you played it, it's very action. There is a lot of action going on. It's not just a simple turn-based like they used to be. And it seems, well, and also if you include 12, for example, that was a drastic depart from the previous combat system of the series. But I'm not here to talk about this, we're already getting off topic. Let's go back to the video response. So in his video, Erick suggests 10 JRPGs that need remakes. The word need, as I mentioned earlier, it's the key here because I think it's a bit excessive to use it because it implies a lot of things. But then he adds that not only they need remakes, but full from scratch remakes, not enhanced ports or remastered, and this to me was sort of the 1-2 punch that pushed me to do this video response. And by the way, let me just clarify that I'm not at all against the idea of remakes of any sorts. I mean, quite the contrary, actually. The game mentioned by Eric in his video are all great, and I'm all for some sort of remake, because it can be a great opportunity to have more people experiencing these classics, especially younger gamers who otherwise might be not inclined to try them due to the fact they are old with old graphics, which is understandable, to be honest. By offering these games with a fresh coat of paint, on the other hand, you will expose them to a newer and bigger audience, and their name is valuable again, ideally, so the companies might be inclined to invest them once again into these franchises, hopefully. And I use quotation, issue with the video, even let's call it that, even though it's not an issue, it's just nitpicking, to be honest, but hey, that's who I am. I'm a very perfectionist kind of guy. Is with the premise of the video. Is that Eric says like they need full from scratch remake, and in my opinion, most of them actually don't. So in this video, I'm going to go through Eric's picks one by one and discuss them and suggest what I would actually do with them remake-wise. Then in the follow-up video, I'm going to suggest some games that, in my opinion, could use some form of remakes. So definitely look forward to that part if you want to know what games I think could use remakes. Obviously, it goes without saying, you may disagree with everything I'm about to say, so definitely let me know in the comments what you think about these individual picks or remakes in general. Though, I have to say, this is how I feel about these specific games, so I don't think I will change my mind anytime soon. So let's just start it, since there is a lot to say about all of these games. So, the first game he mentions is Legend of Dragoon, one of my favorite games of all time. So what a way to start. And I can say already that this game doesn't need a full from scratch remake, so I already disagree on the first one. It's simply because I cannot see Legend of Dragoon working with neither the Final Fantasy VII remake graphics nor turning it into an action RPG, and I think that would be terrible, actually. On the other hand, I would love to see a sort of remake of this game. I mean, I've been like desperately clamoring for something with this series since I finished the first game. I was hoping for a sequel on the PS2, and it never happened. So please, Sony, do something with this series, with this game. It's not even a series. Personally, I think that the best course of action would simply to release a HD remaster of some sort, because, to be honest, those graphics are rather unappealing for today's standards. Even though to me they look perfectly fine, because obviously I have big nostalgia blinders toward this game. As I said, it's one of my favorite games of all time. Looking at it, I always thinking, oh, that is just gorgeous. Look at this beautiful PS1 graphics for Legend of Dragoon. Though, through a remake, maybe there might be a way to actually even increase the story by, like Final Fantasy VII did, by adding new story sections here and there. Though it's, to be honest, this is already this game is already very big. I mean, it took me more than 100 hours to finish it. So, though to be honest, there was a lot of grinding and 100% in that game. So that's why it took me so long. But it is a big game, 4 discs, all of that. The most important thing, however, is that you cannot even think about changing the combat system of Legend of Dragoon. It's part of the game's identity, and if you remove it, you remove what makes Legend of Dragoon Legend of Dragoon. That combat system, it's an integral part of that game's identity, and to me, a big chunk of the game's charm itself. Perhaps you can update it a little bit, nothing wrong there, but the basic structure has to stay the same. For example, you can add more additions to each characters, because some of them only have 4. But you can add more additions, you can add more button combinations, so you don't have just to press the X button and occasionally the circle battle when there is a counterattack. So for example, you can have, say, a 4-button combo addition, so X square, something like this. And more complicated one involves using all 4 buttons. That could be fun. I remember thinking about this back then already. But again, it has to stay the same. Also, when in Dragoon form, it could be cool to have a better way to charge up your physical attack. For example, by pressing the X button or 2 buttons at the same time as fast as possible. Kind of like the magic system worked in that game, that you had to press the button. Because I remember, like, in Dragoon form, to attack you just have to press it as a certain rhythm, and I never really was a huge fan of that, because I could rarely do the perfect attack. So that's maybe why I'm talking about changing that a little bit to make it slightly easier. Also, I think it could be cool to add combo additions, so to have 2 or even more characters attacking at the same time and do special additions, or something like that. That could be fun. And finally, something that all RPGs should have, in my opinion, is the possibility of changing party members in battle, not be stuck with the same ones. Like Breath of Fire 4, Final Fantasy X, that sort of thing. So I think that's all you really need to do with Legend of Dragoon, not starting from scratch. The second game he mentions is Panzer Dragoon Saga. Oh boy. And again, I think this game absolutely doesn't need a full from scratch remake, because it will remove everything that makes it special and unique. And that is the main characteristics of this game. It's one of the most unique and original JRPGs ever made. Could this game use some form of remake? Absolutely. It would allow people to finally play it. Panzer Dragoon, after all, to me, it's one of Sega's best and most original IPs. I was so happy when they announced the remake of the first one for the Switch, and to the point that I've ordered it day one on limited run, and I cannot wait to replay it. And I hope that this remake is successful enough that Sega will consider to do more remakes, like for Panzer Dragoon Zwei and Orta. I mean, can you imagine a remake in HD of Panzer Dragoon Orta, which is the best game on the Xbox? But in this case, I would be more than happy to use Final Fantasy VII graphics. It would be incredible. So I'm all for Panzer Dragoon remakes. Please let it happen. But saying that Sega needs... Well, yeah, you can say that. That Sega needs to do a full from scratch remake of Saga. That's the confusion with the names. I think it's not the right course of action again. The game needs only one thing, and it's updating its graphics. That's it. The game is great. I never played it because it's impossible to play it, basically. But I saw plenty of videos about it since, as I said, I'm a huge fan of the series. So the game is great, but it looks like shit. There's no two ways about it. It's a very, very bad looking game. Because, as we know, early 3D graphics, so PS1, N64, and Sega Saturn, have aged terribly. Plus, the Saturn itself was not a good console for 3D performances. It was a 2D powerhouse. Look at some of those shooters on there. Woof. But I think that the best style for Panzer Dragoon, now that earlier I mentioned like Final Fantasy VII Remake graphics for Orta, but same for the other games. Rather than that, I think an even better option for these and would be the graphical style and art direction of Nier Automata, especially considering the mood and the tone of the Panzer Dragoon game, those dystopic future and all of that. That would be perfect. Also, a little note here. Eric mentioned that perhaps a remake would finally reduce the price for the physical copies of the original game, but I don't think that would be the case. Actually, I think it might even go the other way around, meaning that might be the chance that prices will go up, actually. And it's kind of what happened with digital releases. They didn't reduce the price of physical games. Quite the contrary, prices have gone up because people playing the games thought they wanted the physical copies as well, because they for the love of the game and collector value. So, of course, another factor you have to consider with this, it's a remake would not go down, would not decrease the prices, because this is a legitimately rare game. We're not talking about something like Earthbound. Plus, if you have an amazing remake, people will be inclined to purchase the original. So there is the risk that prices might go up, though I can imagine the game being even more expensive than it already is. How much does a copy of Saga on the Saturn cost? Like between $500 and $700? Like insane. The third mentions is Phantasy Star 4, and I will talk about this in the follow-up video. So let's move on to the fourth pick, which is a very interesting one, Parasite Eve. First of all, I would include Parasite Eve 2 as well, since that game was awesome. I don't see why it should be not considered as part of this package. Then, once again, I think this is another case of what you need to do is simply update the graphics, not start from scratch. Back then, Parasite Eve 1 and 2, they both looked amazing. These were, after all, the cinematic RPGs. But, of course, the first one, it's a 1998 PS1 game, so obviously it looks extremely outdated by today's standards. Parasite 1 and 2 would be perfect with Final Fantasy VII Remake graphics. Absolutely incredible. But that's all you need to do. That's it. It's just about graphics. Especially do not change the gameplay. Eric says himself, ideally, I will even keep the tank controls from the original too, but I understand that a lot of people don't like them. So you can update the gameplay. Perhaps you can have something like Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. So Aya can actually move freely, and the graphics and the mood for Resident Evil remakes would maybe work even better, considering that we're talking about Parasite Eve, and these need to be dark and gritty and twisted. Plus, I wouldn't mind seeing Aya in all that HD glory, if you're not wink wink kind of comment. Also, they can easily add more sections to the games in terms of story, or something they couldn't do back then due to technical limitations with enemies or combat mechanics, but still maintaining the combat system. Because I believe the combat system from Parasite Eve 2 is perfection for these games, so I would 100% maintain it. On the contrary, if you turn these games into generic third-person shooters, you would ruin them. Third Birthday did that. It changed into a third-person shooter with cover-based mechanics, and people completely flipped. And actually, let's talk about Third Birthday for a moment here, because I think that game's negative reputation is way too excessive. I actually liked the Third Birthday. I have no problems admitting it. While it is the weakest of the series, to me it's still a solid game. Also, I don't think the gameplay was the problem with that game. It's true that seeing Parasite Eve as a third-person shooter was a bit weird, but I liked it because it was a good third-person shooter with cover mechanics. What a shocker. Also, I loved the overdrive ability that was introduced in that game. If possible, I would actually add it to the remakes of 1 and 2, because it's such a cool skill to being able to jump from body to bodies in battle. And it would add a lot of strategy if you think about it. Imagine this scenario. You're cornered by a group of enemies, but all of a sudden you manage to escape by using overdrive, into another one and then unleash a powerful mitochondrial attack onto the group. That would be so much fun and amazing. To me, the main issue with the third birthday was actually the story, especially because it felt a bit disjointed at times. Though I have this memory of remembering that the ending kind of made sense and connected most of the dots to me, even though I don't remember anything about it since I played it years ago. The second issue was the fact that the game was limited by the faulty design of the PSP, the fact that you only have one stick. This game to me should have been released on the PS3 or the Vita. So I wouldn't mind an HD remake of the third birthday on PS4 as well, because that's gonna happen. The game, after all, already looked amazing on the PSP, so imagine it on PS4. Plus play it with the DualShock 4. Oh yeah. So, and add more story sections. That's how you correct the third birthday. So yeah, Parasite Eve absolutely needs to come back. After all, it's one of my favorite series from Square. And such a remake of both 1 and 2 could definitely be a good way to reignite people's attention toward this gem of the series. Though it's not gonna happen, and not because Square is a mean company, but financially it's probably not convenient to them, because it's a very niche series and they most likely have to rebuy the rights to use the Parasite Eve franchise. But that's another topic for another time. Next, Eric mentions the Breath of Fire series, and this is personal because, as you know, we're talking about my favorite series of all time. So I'm going to skip this here. I will talk about it in the next video. So let's move to the next entry, which is Persona. More specifically, 1, 2, and 3. To be honest, I was actually surprised to see 3. Do you think this game need a remake? Because for what I understand, Persona 3 Portable is the definitive version of this game. Anyways, I haven't played any of them, so I don't know, but judging from Eric's comments about 1 and 2, it seems like a very reasonable and fair point to remake them. Though I thought that the PSP ports of 1 and 2 were actual remakes already. So this would be a remake of a remake, which is a bit weird. However, I'd say it would be pretty neat to have a remake of Persona 2 that includes both games at once instead of being divided into 2 parts as it's always been. Other than this, though, I don't have much else to say about Persona or the Shin Megami Tensei games in general, since I still need to play so many of them. And I'm sure that there are plenty of SMT games that would definitely benefit from being remade in any form or fashion. So let's move to the next pick, which is Tales of Phantasia, the first Tales of game, and I have to say, for the most part, I agree with Eric on this one. This is a Super Famicom game, so of course it's very outdated, especially considering how far the Tales of series has gone since then. I've played the GBA port and enjoyed it, but the combat system was not that good. It was so slow and so stiff, especially once you play other better Tales games. This becomes basically unbearable. Now that I'm thinking about it, however, I cannot find a proper solution for this one. How can you remake this? And now that I'm talking about it, I'm pretty sure there was a remake of this already. Yes, there was a remake on the PSP in the early 2000s, though it is, of course, it was Japan only. So the game has already been remade, and I don't think we need another remake of the same game. You know what? I actually changed my mind, so I disagree on this one. No Tales of Phantasia, who cares about this after all, when there are much, much better Tales of game that could actually use a proper remake instead of this one. Phantasia, it is the first game in the series, and it shows, I might add. But other than a sort of completionist desire of wanting to play every single game in the series, or for its historical value, if you want to call it that, because it's the first one in such a big series, I don't see much value in remaking this game again. On the other hand, how about the PS2 entries of the series? I haven't played most of them because, after all, Tales of Rebirth was not even released outside of Japan, and Tales of Legendia was not released in Europe. So, as the representative, let's call it like this, of this era, I'm suggesting a big HD remake of the third one, Tales of the Abyss, which, by the way, is my current favorite of the series, and I think it can offer a phenomenal remake. The game, of course, is available on the 3DS as well, not just on the PS2, and that's how I played it on the 3DS. But I think it's more of a port rather than a remake, but of course, correct me if I'm wrong on this. But can you imagine a full HD remake of Tales of the Abyss on PS4 or Switch? Use the graphics and style from Tales of Berseria. That would be amazing to see, like, those characters, all that crazy story looking as gorgeous as that. But also definitely expand the story, especially in order to better flesh out the villains. Because to me, this was the main issue of the game. The whole story, the thing with the replicas and all of that, I really liked it, actually. At times it derailed into too much jibber-jabber technical nonsense, which is fairly typical of the Tales series. But overall, I liked it very much. I still remember all those crazy terminology, like the Cliff of the Sephiroth, the blah blah. You know, I was like, Jesus, this is way too complicated. But again, the overall story was great. The characters were so likable, especially like the main party was great. Like Luke von Fabre, what a turn for a character. Tears, the best Tales character to me. Jade was hilarious. So many memorable characters. But the villains were quite disappointed to me. I mean, the final villain was okay, but all the others felt like henchmen for the most part, even though they were connected with all the main characters. But they felt very incomplete. Also, like, not all of them needed to die, by the way. I mean, I'm okay with character dying if it serves the story, but kill them just for the sake of killing them, it felt like a huge waste, actually. So that was my main issue with Tales of the Abyss. But other than that, it's a fantastic RPG, and in my opinion, a much better option for the Tales series. So definitely a big HD remake of Tales of the Abyss. Next, we have Fire Emblem. And Eric mentions both Genealogy of the Holy War and Thracia 776. And this is actually where I agree with him, and now that I think about it. At one point, following the release of Echoes on the 3DS, being the remake of Fire Emblem 2 Gaiden, I remember very well Intelligent System was hinting that they were thinking about remaking another of the older games in the same or similar fashion as Echoes, and I was all excited about it. The names of the two most likable candidates were 4, Genealogy of the Holy War, or The Binding Blades, which is the game with Roy's story. However, I read that following the big success of Three Houses, this project was scrapped, so we'll see what Intelligent System will do next with the Fire Emblem series. But let's talk about the potential remake of this too, and personally, I would actually give precedence to Genealogy, since it's part of the main series, while Thracia, if I remember correctly, it's a sort of spin-off of Genealogy itself. Like, it takes place within its timeline or something like that. I would agree with Eric, though, that these games actually need full from scratch remakes, since they are so outdated. They are Super Famicom game, after all. In particular, I would argue that every Fire Emblem game prior to Awakening now feels outdated. I'm not saying that the games are bad by any means of the imagination, of course, because they are great. But once you played Awakening and then go back to the older games, and for example, I did this. I played a Game Boy Advance game, and it's tough to get into them, especially gameplay-wise. In my case, I was constantly thinking, man, this is great, but I wish the gameplay was more like Awakening. Why can't it be more like Awakening? This game, after all, perfected the Fire Emblem formula and gameplay in particular to a T. So, in the case of a potential remake of Genealogy of the Holy War and Thracia, eventually, I think they should look and play like either Awakening or Three Houses, though I haven't played this yet, which basically would imply remake them from scratch. So, I really hope Intelligent System would actually do something like that, so these games would finally be available to us in an updated form and all their issues gone. The first comes to mind, it's the infamous difficulty from Thracia, which is supposed to be really hard even from like Fire Emblem standards, which it's scary because we all need more Fire Emblem in our lives. So definitely I would love to see remakes of these two classic from one of my favorite series. So the next pick is Final Fantasy VI, and I disagree completely on this one. I saw it recently so many times online, popping up as like, now that 7 has been remade, we need 6 to be remade like that. No, no, no. Not only I don't think this game needs a full from scratch remake, but even less a remake like Final Fantasy VII. Considering, however, how special and important this game is to me, I was thinking about talking about it, how I would do a remake of it in another video. Though, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how to remake it, but we'll see. For now, I disagree with this, and let's move on to the final game mentioned by Eric, which is Xenogears. I never played this legendary game since it was not released in Europe, so I don't know if it actually needs a full from scratch remake. For what I've seen, though I would argue against that, or at least such a drastic treatment, as it seems that the graphics might be the really only thing that should be updated once again, because again, it's a PS1 game, so it looks outdated. The combat looks fine. It's probably just a, I think, general idea that nowadays people don't want turn-based games anymore, but they want action, action, action. Not sure about that, because the combat in Xenoblade looks perfectly fine. How would you turn like the combat during the mecha section? Something like Zone of the Enders? That would be a bit weird. Perhaps more importantly, a remake would allow the developers to add more story sections to the game, considering that originally this was supposed an epic multi-episode game. So that could be cool, finally, but I don't think it's ever going to happen, to be honest. That's another story. Because, and it's a perfect segue actually, to what Eric said by the end of the video, since he showed more games, but argued that, in his opinion, these don't really need remakes. But to be honest, I was a bit surprised with some of the picks there, because it showed the Growl Lancer series, and I would argue they would definitely need remake, because I've only played Wafer of Time on PSP. It's a cool strategy RPG, but you can definitely improve the combat system. The game also, it's plagued by difficulty spikes to the point that I had to put the game down. I couldn't play. It was too difficult. And it's coming from me, and I'm all for challenging games. Also, as you say, like an HD remaster would allow the art by Satoshi Urushihara to properly shine. Because you already have those character models, like during dialogues and stuff, which are gorgeous. Imagine all of that looking at that. So kind of sort of like a Langerseer, what they did there, but even more, because there is a lot of potential with Growl Lancer. Again, I would argue that a remake of the Xenosaga trilogy would be amazing, though we know it's not going to happen ever. I mean, I was so excited when the rumors of the HD remakes were circulating online. After all, I was never able to play them, since 1 and 3 were never released over here. We have 2 for some reasons. I still remember sawing it in a shop There was like this big box. It was just a special edition. I was very curious about it. It's like, wow, what is this thing? But then I say, well, yeah, what is it? It's called Xenosaga 2. I would rather play 1 first. So, but of course that never happened. I don't know even why Namco Bandai didn't release the DS ports of 1 and 2 over here. That would have been great. Or a digital release on Switch or PS4. Just something. That's what I'm saying. Do something with these games here in the West. However, Namco Bandai has officially said that it will not happen because, to quote what the director and producer at the company, it failed in a profitable market analysis, i.e., most likely it will not make enough money to justify the costs of making these remakes. So, it's sad but not surprising, considering Xenosaga, it's a very niche series. He also added that almost certainly the idea will not proposed again, so most likely Xenosaga, it's done. Then Eric also briefly mentioned the Suikoden series. I don't remember very well what he said, but I think it was something like maybe not, it would be cool. But then he added that it's not going to happen because of Konami. At first I was like snarkily thinking, oh, okay, so we're using this logic now because all of the previous remakes are going to happen. Sony, after all, has always been so invested in Legend of Dragoon. But all jokes aside, Eric is absolutely right about this. Konami is to blame about it since they dropped the ball on the series since the DS games. They lost interest into this for a long time now. To be honest, actually, Tier Craze didn't really impress me that much. It's the only Suikoden game I played, so I'm sure that the rest of the series is much better. But I remember thinking after playing it, it was a big that's it kind of moment. I thought, is this the best that Suikoden has to offer? It's a good RPG on the DS, sure, but I was expecting far more from such a legendary series. Whenever I manage to play the series from the beginning, I'm sure I fall in love with, especially 1 and 2 in particular. But I also heard really good things about 3. But to think, I actually think that the last new game in the main series dates back to the PS2. That's an eternity ago. Because Tier Craze, if I understand correctly, again, I'm not familiar with the series, so I'm not sure. But Tier Craze, it's more of its own thing. It's not connected with the rest of the series, so that's that. I think the last new game was what, Suikoden 5 or Suikoden Tactics, something like that. But I don't know if Tactics is connected with the rest of the series. So yeah, it's definitely time to bring back Suikoden, and remakes could be the way to do it. But since I haven't played the game, I'm not sure. I'm not going to speculate on how we can possibly remake then, because 1 and 2 are one thing on the PS1, but from the third game onwards, the series is very different because it's on the PS3. So if any of you guys have experienced the Suikoden games, how would you do it? Definitely let me know. I'll be curious. And eventually, one thing I want to do, if not this year, sooner or later, I want to download Suikoden 1 and 2 on my Vita and play that way, because obviously I'm not going to spend a crazy amount of money asked for the physical copies. So digital will be the way to go, and then we'll see for the PS2. But I really want to get into Suikoden. The problem is I have so many other games that I have to play that it's not the priority right now. But we'll see. We'll see. So there you have it. This is my response and comments to Eric's video and picks for JRPGs that, in his opinion, need full from scratch remakes. As said, though I think the premise for the video were debatable in terms and wording, this was definitely an interesting one. As I said, we all love to speculate about remakes of our favorite JRPGs. But definitely let me know what you think about this topic. What would you do with these specific games through comments, or if you feel more adventurous, do video responses. or what would be some RPGs that you want to see remade. However, as said earlier, this is just part one of this, let's call it ambitiously, project. Next time, I don't know when though, don't expect it very regularly from me. I will suggest some games that, in my opinion, might use remake, and note my wording, I didn't say need. I'm just a pedantic asshole, I know that. So with this, I'll leave it to you guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know what you think, and stay safe and take care.